Hello, everyone. It's time for the pilot show, a show for folks that don't, for and by folks who don't always finish things, strange or otherwise. Jason, I'm Captain Logan, and I've got Jayson, my son, who is our local researcher, the guy who finds out how all these things come together to begin TV shows. This is our fifth episode. We've started in on some Halloween horror-y type things, and last time we're a few days late. We usually do this earlier in the week, and I was under the weather this week, so that's why we're starting as late as we are this time. Just finally got around to being able to pull this together, and thanks for joining us live for the podcast. Thanks for watching after the fact or listening after the fact. If you're doing that, I see a couple people in the comments right now. Hello, Hayden Spring. Hi, Robert. Hi, Senior Sticks. So last time we did a Versus episode, we went back to the 60s.
Yeah.
And we're going to do more things like that. We did our first Versus episode, and we talked about the Addams Family and the Munsters. I thoroughly enjoyed that show, Jason.
Yeah.
That was a ton of fun. I'm excited to do something like that again. This time, we went for a horse of a totally different color, but still in the kind of spooky, horror vein. And we went to just a few years ago, but a period piece from the 80s that would take place 2 decades after the shows that we just watched, but is made 40 years after
40
that.
Years after. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So I picked this because some folks had asked us to tackle this. One person in particular put in, I think, a big super chat at some point asking for this, and I went ahead and decided to get to it quicker. Sorry, I think I've got that listed here, and I'm looking for his name. Oh, yes, Richard's Victims. Thanks, Richard's Victims. Clearly a horror fan, Richard's Victims, and my condolences to his victims. But we're going to go ahead and do the first episode for Stranger Things, and this is gonna kind of set a new precedent, Jason, for kinds of shows that we're tackling, because before this, everything we've done so far have been broadcast television shows, and not all of them have been honest to God pilots, where you shoot a pilot, you take it to a studio, and they either greenlight the show or not, or rather a studio would order a pilot.
Yeah.
Hoping to take it to series, but they don't order more episodes if they don't like it, if they don't think it'll sell, if there's any place they can put it in their time slot.
Right.
And we've done at least one show. I think House was one where Fox had already ordered the episode count, and so it wasn't a true pilot.
Yeah.
Wasn't that one?
I'm pretty sure.
But then obviously the Munsters had multiple pilots.
Yep.
And Addams Family was probably a pilot, like an actual true pilot, not just first episode, because everything was made that way back at that point.
Well, and it really feels like a pilot, it's a good pilot.
Yeah, and then who knows with the Animorphs? If that was an order because that book series was popular, or if it was another pilot situation. But now we get into things where it's a pilot only in name only it's the first episode. It's not really a pilot. A lot of streaming shows, especially serialized ones that are basically very long movies and miniseries, are get an order.
Yeah.
In the first place.
Yep.
And are able to tell a story from beginning, middle to end.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at today, and I'm sure we'll do lots more of these down the road. So we're getting more into, I guess my point is we're getting more into modern television storytelling and television production.
And this is our first only aired on streaming show as well.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. So Jason's going to go ahead and give us the rundown on this. He's going to give us some background for how Stranger Things was developed. And I know almost nothing about the background for this show. I've never really looked into it. And as I've said before, I'm intentionally not reading too much before I come into this because I don't want to steal Jason's thunder. And I want to learn things along with you guys. So my prep for this was simply watching the show with Jason. I looked at it a second time. And so I'm prepared to do some story talk. But
yeah. They're actually, this show wasn't as interesting as some of the other shows we've done.
Oh, like, really?
Just it was kind of just
looking for background.
Yeah, like the Duffer Brothers made the show, and they basically they had like, you know, like the book where it has all of, like, you know, character names and, you know, things so that they could show to different companies.
Yeah.
And
To networks,
yeah,
studios.
and that's just how a lot of shows are made, and so they just did that, and so it wasn't that interesting.
But I'm sure there are influences and stuff.
There are.
Now, real quick, before we get into that, I wanted to mention I have actually watched the first season of the show before. It's one of those things that was insanely popular and people wouldn't stop talking about, which put me off to it a little bit. I have that sometimes with things where I just got sick of hearing about it, and it wasn't immediately an idea that grabbed me, where it's like, I like some movies from this period, but I think I was already, even at this time, probably you know, a little bit trepidatious about the kind of nostalgia grab things, where it's like, okay, just how authentic is this going to be in trying to make something that captures the spirit of a Spielberg thriller or adventure thing, like an E.T. or a Poltergeist, those kinds of things. And like I said, I just kind of got sick of hearing about it. So I finally watched it, but I wasn't paying like real deep, close attention to it. I think I had it on in the background when I was like tagging comics when I used to have a flea market booth. So I don't think I ever gave the show a fair enough shake. Like, I had it on, I sort of watched it, it was fine. I wasn't like real impressed with it. I had a hard time getting into it. And so this is now an excuse for kind of my second attempt at looking at this and really giving it a fair shake.
Yeah.
And you hadn't seen this at all.
I hadn't seen it at all, and I didn't know much about it. I actually didn't know, like, really anything about it. I didn't even realize it was, like, an 80s piece.
Oh, you didn't even know that much?
Yeah, I didn't know that much.
You probably assumed the thriller, horror kind of thing.
Yeah, I just assumed it was another one of those, you know, Netflix dramas that everyone likes, and, you know.
Whatever that
is, I don't know.
But, like, did you expect horror or sci-fi, or?
I expected horror. Like, I didn't know, you know, how creepy it would be, and it's not that creepy. At least the first episode. I'm not sure.
Yeah. It doesn't go any farther than anything else from that period you've seen, even, I would say.
Right.
Like, I think it does a pretty good job of balancing modern sensibilities with the period that it's harkening back to.
Yeah.
Where if you can handle Poltergeist, you can handle this.
Yeah.
And in the first episode, it doesn't even go as far as that does yet, but it's also, you know, just getting its sea legs in.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, what did you find out about this show?
So when the Duffer Brothers originally pitched the show was called Montauk because it was going to be set in Montauk, New York.
Oh. Interesting.
Though the original idea of the show was the same, so all the characters were the same and stuff. It had a different name though, and it was.
Did it have the same initial premise?
Yeah.
So it still had a kid that disappears at the beginning.
Yep.
Genetic engineering.
Yep.
11 was there.
Right.
Okay.
But it was just set in a different spot, and it was originally going to be filmed in Long Island because it was going to be set in New York. But it was they decided to set it in Indiana instead, and also they were filming it in November, and they were having a hard time like setting up in New York in the
snow,
fall,
cold.
And,
Yeah.
So they decided to go to Atlanta.
You gotta wonder, like, alternate universe situations, if the show had been called Montauk, is it as popular? Does it become the phenomenon that it is? I mean, you gotta watch Montauk! How do you even spell that?
I can just imagine the logo. It's still Stranger Things, but it just says Montauk.
It's still got the lines?
Yeah.
It still has the whole neon thing?
Yeah,
that's great.
That would be funny. So the idea for the show was
Netflix's Montauk.
So the idea for the show was influenced by mainly Stephen King novels and Spielberg movies.
Yeah.
And even they went so far that the logo is heavily influenced by Firestarter.
Yeah.
That's the big thing.
I was trying to put my finger on it. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
No, you're right. There is more Stephen King influence in this than I was giving it credit for.
Yeah.
And then the way it does, I mean, we'll talk about this when we watch it, but, and as always, guys, we are going to watch the show, and talk about it as we do a commentary as we're watching it, so we'll have, more preamble than we usually would for other shows, if you haven't watched this with us before, because we're talking about history first, so it is intentional that we have 25-30 minutes or so, before we actually get into the commentary. But anyway, when it gets into... I'm trying to remember the words at the beginning after you get the big logo with, I want to say like chapter whatever that like comes at you, and then and then it kind of changes to black and white. That's like Halloween.
Yeah, it is.
Or at least I think it is. That's what it reminded me of. Robert just put in a $5 super chat. Can I read that real quick?
Yeah.
He says, thanks, man. Part of what made the show so popular was how it gave equal screen time to the kids, teenagers, and adult characters. Anyone can relate to it. Yeah, that's a great point.
And I mean, that's what 80s movies were doing at that time as well, is they had, and I mean, they are mixing some stuff together, because you had teenager dramas, and you had dramas mostly with kids, and then you had this, like, the parent stuff.
Yeah, because, I mean, Poltergeist is about the adults.
Yeah.
Much more. I mean, the kids get scenes, but they're more, victims in scenes.
Yeah.
The real drama comes from the parents.
Yeah. And then I haven't
That's true, but then you get things like the Goonies and stuff.
Right.
Where it's kind of all the kids.
Yeah. And I still haven't seen that. I've seen Gremlins, but I haven't seen Goonies.
But E.T. is more of a mix like this is.
Okay, yeah.
Where, like, the mother gets a decent amount of screen time.
Yeah.
But he's right. This does more of that, and you're right about blending genres. But it also has a lot more screen time. I mean, it also has a lot more runtime to give to all those different characters.
Yeah. So the actors auditioning for the show read lines from the film Stand By Me.
Oh, interesting.
The brothers said that they auditioned about 1,000 kids.
I bet.
And there were like, it's kind of crazy. I don't know.
And the kid that plays Mike especially won the lottery with this, because he just became the Stranger Things kid and just keeps getting cast in everything after that. It seems like Hollywood really does not want that kid to grow up.
Yeah.
Or doesn't realize that, like, people age over time. Because, I mean, because he's in It, and he's in Ghostbusters Afterlife, and which cannot stop casting that kid and everything.
Yeah.
I think he's in It. I haven't seen that in a long time, but I'm pretty sure that's also him. Anyway. Hayden Spring says the Goonies is very overrated. Yeah, I reference it because that had to have been an influence on this. I've only seen that movie one time when I was a kid, so I can't really speak to it much.
Yeah, I want to see it at some point, but let's see. The budget for the first season was $6 million per episode.
Wow.
So the whole season was 48.
I wonder how that compares to other Netflix budgets.
Yeah, and I know, like, later they do, like...
They really ramp it up?
Like 15 per episode or something.
I mean, their production values are wonderful. Like, you can see everything on the screen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The first season was watched by 14 million people in the first 35 days.
Wow.
Making it the third most watched Netflix show that year.
Behind
the first season of Fuller House. And
which you auditioned for.
I did. And the fourth season of Orange is the New Black.
Wow. So Orange is the New Black was still pulling those kind of numbers in fourth season?
Yeah.
I didn't know. It was doing better than 14 million in fourth season? That's wild. I had dropped off by then. I wasn't watching it anymore, and I don't remember hearing anything about it at that point. Crazy.
Yeah.
Robert, I wonder how the budget of the show compares to House of Cards or Orange is the New Black. Yeah, me too. I wouldn't think Orange is the New Black would probably cost much more than this. You know, you build your standing sets and you're mostly there. I mean, you're in a prison, or or you get an abandoned prison and you shoot there. I actually can't remember how they did that. I don't know if they built that or I assume they built that, but they may have already had something that they went and bought. I don't know that.
Yeah.
I've never looked in the background of that either. We will not do that show on the pilot show until you're much older, if ever. But Hayden says the alternate timeline where Jayson is in Fuller House is wild. Yeah, it sure is. Yeah. Slipmaker, my mind is equally blown at those Orange is the New Black viewership numbers. I didn't know that. I would like to know what the viewership is like further on into this series, because the reputation is immediately by season 2 it tanks and it's not as good. Or when I say it tanks, the quality tanks. But I don't know if viewership did. I mean, it feels like it's still in the zeitgeist and still a thing people talk about and people buy merchandise and there's still a fandom for it. Maybe not to the level of, but again, this stayed good until last season. People tell me anyway. But maybe not like Game of Thrones, which really stuck in the ether all the way through.
Yeah.
Hayden, has Jayson auditioned for anything else? No, not really. I mean, so back then he was in modeling, and he did some local auditions for commercials and things. That's really the only TV audition you did, and it was a video thing. So we didn't have to fly there, which is why we did it. We just shot that here in my living room, but in our old house.
I remember, like, you guys always tell me that I auditioned for that show, but, like...
You don't remember doing it?
I don't remember doing that.
You were great at memorization even back then.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you would have been, what, 5 or 6?
Yeah. And
you had no trouble reading and memorizing lines. I thought you did a great job. I thought it was a good audition.
Yeah.
That show was terrible, so I'm kind of glad we didn't have to figure out a way to put you in it, but... Because, like, we would have had to uproot ourselves to do that, which would have been nuts. But, anyway, I don't know if we've ever talked about that. Senior Sticks, Cap with 6 children, you can make the new Jackson 5. Yeah, but who do we have to leave out? That's really the question. Jayson, before we get in, so that's all your background?
Yeah.
You didn't find a lot, did you?
I didn't find a lot.
Did you look up anything about, like where some of these actors have gone after this, or where they came from?
No, not really. I looked at a couple people, but that's about it.
Yeah, when you're kind of low on like a production information, it might be a good idea to go to some of those places.
Yeah.
And just what else did some people that work on these things do? And I know that this is newer, but I'd like to know if some of these kids worked in anything before this.
Yeah.
So before we get into the commentary and start watching the show, I'm just curious to listen to your overall take on it.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the first hour of this. I thought they did a good job of, like, directing it and writing it in such a way that it really feels like, 80s movies. And but it's also not straight in your face, is what I like about it. Is it's like, yeah, there are like posters and stuff that are like, oh, look, it's an 80s movie, but that's about it.
But you think it feels genuine?
I think it feels, yeah.
You feel like you're really there?
Yeah.
And now, does it feel like a product of the time, or does it feel like a throwback to that time? What I mean is does it feel like a thing that was made now, or does it feel like a thing that could have come out back then?
The thing is, there are certain scenes where, like, if you showed me that scene, I would be like, oh, that's from the 80s.
What movie was that in?
What movie was that in? But if you showed me certain scenes, like, maybe, like, some of the, like, science fiction stuff, I might be like, oh, I think that is, like, a more modern show. But there's a certain,
Which is interesting, because so far, that's the stuff that's some of the stuff that I actually buy more as being a product of the 80s.
Okay, yeah. I think some of the definitely like the kid stuff and the teenager stuff.
Go back
I
to the
think
third
is-
act of ET with the guys in the hazmat suits that are going after the alien, and get back to me because
Okay.
it reminds me of that stuff, and also like some of this stuff you just haven't seen or haven't seen in a long time, because there's a lot of like close encounters with some of that stuff.
Yeah. I still need to see that movie.
Hayden Spring says season 3 has a really in-your-face reference to New Coke. I think it's difficult to walk the line with that.
Yeah.
To find that balance, because and I also think that it's somewhat subjective. Like people could be hypersensitive to that, where they're waiting to be slapped in the face by the period stuff to go, hey, everybody, remember the '80s, and it's like a celebration of it before it's again authentically a piece set there. So if you're like making a checklist, okay, here's all the times they reference the thing from the 80s, and that's going to irritate you, then you can find things in kind of in your face that you and I didn't. But the problem is you do have to make those references.
Yeah.
Because like if you avoid them, then it's generic.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's also the problem sometimes with product placement, where it's like sometimes people get so again hypersensitive to that, where like if they see a Dr. Pepper, they're like, ooh, product placement. But I'm like, well, in a lot of situations, I'd rather see a McDonald's in the background than some random made up place, unless it's supposed to be timeless and heightened, because that's what my world looks like. I go outside and if I just shot a movie about my regular life, there'd be product placement everywhere, especially me. Like I'm covered in product.
Yeah.
I tattooed it on myself. Like I'm covered in product.
Yeah.
So anyway, when it does feel like it's in your face, I think it's when it kind of overtakes the storytelling.
Yeah.
And when it's screaming at you real hard from the beginning, like I think you got to get on the right foot with it from the start, and I think this absolutely does that.
Yeah. But I think they did a really good job with like sets and stuff. Making it very much like stuff from that era.
Yeah, you gotta really applaud the prop department.
Yeah.
In the show.
Yeah.
Because what they found and built is amazing.
Yeah.
Just that's where a lot of the authenticity comes from for me, and then also in score.
Yeah.
Just in making it feel more like the thing from there, from that time period, I should say. Do you know with the research you did? And we could look this up because I don't know this. Was this shot on film or is it digital? Because it looked digital to me, and I would think you'd want to shoot this on film.
It is digital. Yeah.
I feel like that's a mistake.
I
wish they Walking Deaded it.
Yeah, they added like a slight like a little bit of like a filter, but that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That hurts the authenticity of it a little bit, but there's also that question of purpose, right? So, or of intent. So, if the show wants to try to make you feel like you're watching something that could have been released then you probably want to go film. If it wants to be a modern show that is set in that time and harkens back to Spielberg movies and Stephen King and that kind of stuff, but wants to do it in more of a modern way, then digital makes sense. And I think it's a little bit closer to that. And that's why when I asked you, do you think it feels like authentically a thing that could be made back then? I think it's somewhere in the middle, and I think it's intentionally somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And I think it really works that way.
Yeah.
I don't need it to try to convince me that it was made in 1983.
Yeah. I think I the thing that this made me think of the most? 24.
Why?
Because I don't know, the parents kid gets kidnapped and they're like
That's hilarious.
I don't know. That's what I thought of.
Just in the setup.
Yeah.
Well, and I was reminded of the X-Files a little bit. because that's in the initial setup with the X-Files also, with Mulder's sister who gets kidnapped. Admittedly, like way before that, she's been missing and maybe abducted by aliens for a long time. But and then of course, again, there's a reason that Poltergeist is referenced so hard in this, because not only was that produced by Spielberg and it gets some of its cues from it, but the setup is similar, where you have the little girl that disappears, and the line on the phone at the end is like a direct callback to Poltergeist.
Yeah.
Where I mean, it's not exactly the same situation, and it's more than breathing in Poltergeist, but the phone is like the TV, where it's like, oh, she's somewhere, we don't know where she is.
Yeah.
And then of course in Poltergeist it turns out she's actually in the ether, and is, you know, in the great beyond, and is communicating through the television.
Yeah,
and here you don't know yet what exactly it is, but it feels like it could be supernatural like that.
Yeah.
Robert Wildcap, are you and Jason ever going to cover the Walking Dead pilot? I mean, maybe when he's 18.
20 years.
20, I don't know. Okay, let's go ahead and watch the pilot now, and we'll talk some more about Stranger Things. I will say real quick that now that I've gone back to this again, I kind of wish I'd paid closer attention to it when I looked through it the first time around.
Oh, really?
Because I was definitely enjoying it a lot more, allowing myself to just be sort of sucked up by the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's visually stunning.
Yeah, it is.
And there's some great performances in it.
Yeah.
And it takes me back to childhood. And that is certainly intentional. Give me a second, guys. I've got to set up the show here. I thought I did this already. But what I mean is, it takes me back to childhood, not just in I've seen things like this, and I think a lot of the popularity of this is, and Robert's right in that it appeals to different people for different reasons, and that's why it got so popular. That's absolutely true. But for me, the authenticity of it that I really appreciate is not just, oh, I've seen movies and shows that are kind of like this, and I miss when we made stuff like this.
Yeah.
But also, it's authentic enough where it reminds me of real life things from that time period.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I can't say that time period because this takes place a year before I was even born. But like, I have memories of the very late '80s, early '90s, and when I was 5 or 6, I ran around the neighborhood with my friends on three-wheelers and stuff, and we didn't have any adult supervision, and like all of that resonates with me.
Yeah.
And so it's of a different time. It's not just like when we made things like this, but also stuff that we used to do back then that people don't do as much now. Okay, let's go ahead and get going on this. Robert, I was about 15 when I started The Walking Dead. Yeah, you've always been into horror. I don't think Jason could handle it quite yet. Robert, Cap, you let him read Watchmen. I think he can handle The Walking Dead. It's different. I don't know.
Yeah,
Watchmen isn't anything like as violent and visceral as that. And I don't know, like looking at it in, I hesitate because I was going to say looking at it in live action with as violent as even that pilot is, I think Jason would have a tough time with it. But some of the adult subject matter with the comics, I wouldn't let him read that right now either. So, yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into this. So if you want to watch it with us, and we encourage you to do that, but we'll make this as podcasty as possible as we're talking through this. Pull it up on Netflix or on disc if you have it that way. Get it to timestamp 0 and press play whenever I say now. It is, make sure that you're watching the first season. We made that mistake because I had watched all the way through this once before, and so Netflix just kept my place. And it said chapter 1, so we just started watching it. We got 5 minutes into the first episode of season 2, and I was like, wait a minute, we're watching the wrong season. And somebody said earlier, it like immediately lost the authenticity I was talking about in the second season. I could feel that just with that opening scene of season 2. It did not feel like the same show to me.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. All right, here we go. Everybody, hold on. I've got to pull up the timer. All right, folks, everybody please press play right now. So you got the lightning and clouds and everything behind the Netflix logo. It's like immediately this is supposed to be a big event.
Yeah, it's the big Netflix show to rule all the other Netflix shows, you know.
This was also still during a period where there was a novelty, still something of a novelty to streaming. Again, you were in 4th season of Orange is the New Black. You were in like the 4th or 5th season of House of Cards. So this had been going on for a few years, but they didn't have 1,000,001 shows yet.
Right.
And so whenever they had a new, scripted release, it was still a big deal.
Yeah. Oh, and also, this is the first,
And what I was going to say, I'm just wondering how popular they thought this show was going to be. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this is the first show that we've done so far that I remember coming out.
Oh, interesting.
Because all the other ones came out before I was even born.
That's a great point, yeah. So we're finally in your era. Okay, so are you saying this is the stuff that feels pretty modern to you?
I think so, yeah.
I think it splits the middle pretty well.
Yeah. Because first, when I first watched this, I didn't realize it was supposed to be like an 80s movie, so I thought it was like it's an 80s, it's set in the 80s, but it's not,
This is a really tightly woven pilot. I'm impressed with all the transitions, and it takes a lot of cues, again, from 80s horror movies more than anything, with things like the guy gets picked up, and then we transition to a sound effect that you think at first is still part of the monster you were hearing, and then it's just a sprinkler, and then for a second you're supposed to think that the kid is talking about what you just saw, but they're actually playing Dungeons and Dragons.
And that's also like the beginning of E.T.
Oh, that's true.
Where they're introduced playing.
I forgot they play D&D in that. Yeah, that's right. But they're not eating pizza and spilling things. In spilling Pepsi. That doesn't happen. And of course, this is all foreshadowing for the big monster stuff to come.
Yep.
The most impressive thing to me in the writing of this pilot is how there is pizza, but then they're not eating it at the moment, and nobody spills it.
Right, and then later he'll be like, "Hey, does anyone want this piece of pizza?"
Yeah.
He just goes around the house,
and he's trying to use it as an excuse to talk to the hot sister. Jason and I appreciate this right away because we're trying to get into pencil and paper RPGs ourselves right now. And so a couple months ago, you wouldn't even have really appreciated, you got to roll better than a 13. But now you get that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I really like how, of course, every detail is there for a reason.
Yeah.
And when you look at it on a second viewing, you really appreciate why all those things are there.
Yeah.
There's stuff that might seem kind of arbitrary at first glance that absolutely is not. And that's partly why it doesn't feel in your face with the references, because they're all really well thought out and curated.
Yeah.
Everything's there for a reason. Or at least the majority of it is. All the big stuff. Even your song choices and movie references and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I mean, they're way more in, like, the background than something like, even stuff like Poltergeist that came out in the 80s and has references all over the kid's wall and stuff.
Yeah.
And here there's, like, 2 things.
Yeah, they don't overdo it. They don't go crazy with it.
And D&D came out in, like, 78. I think. I can't remember.
I think it was late 70s, yeah.
Late 70s.
Robert, the show is a good gateway horror for young teens. Yeah, I think so, too. because the stakes are real. It's sufficiently creepy, but it doesn't get intense to the point where you're gonna scar anybody over it. Probably. Yeah. I don't know what the other seasons do. It is one of those shows where I appreciate that the first season stands alone as well as it does, so you can get away with not watching anymore if the rest of it sucks.
Yeah.
And that's why these things get numbers after them, and people stop even calling them seasons. You know, like it's Stranger Things 1, Stranger Things 2. Like they might as well be movies.
Yeah.
And so it seems like a good first movie with some not great sequels, which is. People are saying good things about 4, but that's pretty par for the course for 80s horror stuff.
What happens in X-Men 134? Is that a big?
So that is also definitely intentional, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's a little bit irritating. I looked it up because just to make absolutely certain, I was pretty sure I knew what that was.
Is that Dark Phoenix Saga?
It is.
Okay, that's what.
And do you get the clear foreshadowing with that? And the relevance to the story.
Not really.
Telekinesis.
Oh.
You have a girl with telekinetic powers.
I was like, there's something that has to do with, but like, what
who is maybe being experimented on because she has abilities or is being given abilities. We don't know yet from the pilot. Retroactively, I was also getting really strong Logan vibes going back to this. Because I know you haven't seen that whole movie, but and that's a year after this, which means a lot of what that is in that movie couldn't have really been influenced by this, and they came to some of the same stuff. Like, you've got somebody being experimented on, genetic engineering, and you've got and it's a girl with powers.
Yep.
Like X-23. Robert says 4 gets pretty dark. Well, and I also am okay with the idea that you might grow up with a thing like this.
Yeah.
Give it kind of that Harry Potter effect.
Yeah.
Except with Harry Potter, it's fun, bright, cheery, almost Christmas feeling movie in the first place, and then it gets a lot more dark and dour by the end. And this
like
has
Power Rangers too.
This has to start. Yeah, this has to start in a darker place.
Yeah.
Than that in the first place. So I don't know. Maybe at some point you could go all the way to like Bates Motel places with it, but you'd have to get to like season 8, 11, 15.
Right.
I feel like, and maybe it's intentional, I'm not sure, I feel like the kid playing Will is cast to look too close to Mike.
Yeah.
The first couple times I saw this, I was a little bit confused because I thought this was Mike for a second.
Yeah. See, I just couldn't even remember any of their, like, names, and I was like...
Well, even if you don't know the names, though, you know the different roles that they have. Like, Mike's the kind of the leader of the group.
Yeah.
Who is, like Raphael in the 1990 Ninja Turtles movie. No, I'm kidding. I adore this theme, by the way.
Yeah, it's great. I had always, like, heard it in stuff, because this show gets referenced all the time, but I never actually knew that it was from this.
Yeah, Senior Sticks, season 4 would not be in the 90s because, as far as I understand it, each season of this is the next year, so it's in real time. And keep in mind that you'd have to keep recasting every season if you set it very much later.
Yeah, because this is set in 83.
Because these kids aren't growing up that fast.
Yeah.
Although
so the last season would be 87.
Although I'm sure they're trying to, with delays and things, because they've only had, 4 seasons in 7 years, so I would assume that they've still got these kids playing characters that are, at this point, younger than they ought to be.
Yeah.
So check it out. That's very Halloween.
Oh, yeah.
But maybe also some Stephen King movies. But yeah, I really like the choice of the synth music.
Yeah.
And that helps to really ground you in this decade. But it doesn't feel cheesy throwback.
Yeah.
You know, and also that sound is coming back a little bit, like just electronic music, electronic score.
True. So like, a wide audience.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think it really does the job. It gives you some of that retro vibe, of course, but it's not silly,
Yeah.
and it's very, very moody.
Okay, so I really like this character.
I think he might be my favorite character so far.
Yeah.
Of the adults, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about the sheriff.
Yeah.
Remember, some people may not be watching with it.
Yeah, this is the sheriff.
Robert says the actors have aged more than the kid characters have. Yeah, they would have to. Exactly. One thing this show really nails is characters that are, and this is kind of an archetype. We had a lot of this in the 80s. Characters that are kind of gruff, a little rough around the edges, but you have hearts of gold, like their hearts are in the right place.
Yeah.
And characters that are very politically incorrect and aren't necessarily sensitive to people, but like at the end of the day, they do the right thing. They try to help people, and
yeah,
there is not any revisionist history stuff going on with this first season. I don't know if that becomes a problem at all that plagues this later, but again, it does feel modern enough in its production values. But it doesn't feel like any, like modern social ideas are permeating in too much, and we're revising what this period felt like. And so it's not afraid to do what a lot of 80s movies would do in having, some male characters that are being womanizing. That's not to say that that's okay that people would act that way, but just that it was prevalent. You'd have a lot of that. The teen romance is very believable.
Yeah.
To the point where you're wondering the whole show how much of a creep he's going to be.
Yeah.
And I was actually kind of shocked when you get to the end of the scene in her bedroom. I'm getting ahead of myself, but when they're making out, that he goes back to helping her study, and that he doesn't try to take advantage of her, because I really thought that's where we were going with that.
Yeah.
And we've all seen that scene in 100 horror movies.
Yeah. I also really like how we see pretty much, like, maybe like half the kids' families in like the first episode. And we kind of just see,
And it juggles a lot of characters and situations without getting lost in the weeds with anything. It all feels like the same story is being told. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very, what I mean is we're naturally introducing all of our major characters and giving a sense of their background and who they are without my getting lost anywhere.
Yeah.
And so some of the success of that is in how the show is structured, how the script is plotted. And some of it is just in creating characters that are all unique enough individually.
Yeah.
Of course, you gotta set up the bullies, but I like that we don't do the typical over-the-top, like, stick heads in toilets and that kind of thing right away. I'm sure they'll do crap like that later.
Yeah.
I don't remember, because it's been too long since I've seen the show. But they're kind of just putting a pin in the bully thing.
Yeah.
Alex Barron says they completely sanitized Steve's character in later seasons. He's still fun, but much less interesting. I'm sad to hear that.
Yeah. I think this is the stuff that makes me think of 80s movies like the most.
Just the high school drama?
Yeah.
Or the fashions?
Yeah, just the whole school. I don't know.
They've really nailed the look with the girl with the glasses, with like the really conservative blouse and.
Yeah.
I know we keep harping on this, but It's just impressively not over the top 80s.
Yeah.
Like, I was a little kid in the late 80s, but from what I remember, this is kind of what the world felt like.
Mm.
I mean, things were changing. We were getting closer to what the 90s was going to be like, obviously.
Yeah.
But,
do you like how this character is introduced? Where like they've been talking about him for maybe like 10 minutes and then
yeah, I didn't really think about that. It is kind of odd that he's talked about in the background, like it's going to be sort of a big deal or something, I guess.
yeah.
I don't think there's an intentional mystery really made of him.
Yeah.
But you're right. I didn't really think about that. That it's a character that.
Where it's like, what's he gonna be like?
No, that's true. You have to be kind of imagining somebody if they've been talking about him for a long time before we finally get there. He's more or less what you would expect, I think.
Yeah.
He definitely looks like a kid that could have walked out of off the set of The Karate Kid or of I don't know, Mac and Me or The Last Starfighter.
Yeah.
He could have been the kid in The Last Starfighter.
See, I was thinking more like,
or at least one of the kids in that trailer park.
Yeah. Like some sort of like a Dirty Dancing or something.
Yeah, sure. So this is another kind of typical situation with 80s horror. I'm reminded of Misery, where you have a small town sheriff that gets maybe a little complacent, and because he never has to deal with any real, but he's also frustrated. Like, this guy is frustrated because he's bored.
Yeah.
He's in a small town where nothing interesting ever happens, and he's maybe even questioning his own competence and his place in the world. And then all of a sudden, he's going to be almost gifted a horrible situation,
Yeah.
which sounds bad, but like now he's going to be able to prove his mettle.
Yeah.
You know, and well, and when I say he's bored, maybe it's also more that he wants a distraction from the tragedies of his life, right? Because he's obviously sad because he lost a kid.
Yeah.
You were laughing at a line that we
Yeah.
loved.
He's great.
Oh, the whole thing about sleeping with a girl in the backseat.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I pretended to be on the debate team. Yeah, no, that's great. I think the only actor I knew coming into this was Winona Ryder.
Okay. What else was she in?
The only thing you've probably seen her in is she is Amanda Grayson in Star Trek 09.
Oh, okay.
Which was kind of odd casting.
Well, there's the Star Trek.
Yeah, there's our Star Trek connection. We always gotta have one.
Yep. Has there been a show that we haven't gotten the Star Trek reference?
I don't
with?
think so. So we need to try to keep doing that if we can.
Yeah.
Keep getting them in there.
I think.
We definitely did it with House.
Yep.
There's no talk about Animorphs without bringing up Star Trek.
Right.
Although somehow I think we didn't even bring up Conspiracy when we talked about that.
No.
With the Yeerks. There's a season 1 episode that's basically Yeerks.
Oh, okay.
Of TNG.
Yeah. Adam's Family, there wasn't anyone that had to do with Star Trek. I don't think.
No, but in that
not
episode we referenced Star Trek, I'm sure, because it was the 60s.
Yeah.
I think. We talked about Batman more.
Yeah. Well, no, Lurch is in it. Star Trek
Yes.
episode. Yep.
Yes, that's
And
right.
then-
Nope, we did talk about that.
Yep.
Yeah, because we brought up Mr. Home and
Yep.
yeah, the 1 degree of separation with Lurch in Star Trek always. Yep.
Yep.
Nope, you're right. We did do that. That's right.
So never mind.
The gray-haired scientist guy, whatever his name ends up being, is, in my mind, the most 80s-looking actor in this entire show, this entire pilot.
Oh, really?
Yeah. he really feels like we went back in time and pulled him out of a Spielberg movie.
Yeah. Robert, I have seen Beetlejuice several times at this point.
Oh, Jason's a big fan of Beetlejuice. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we have a commentary of that on the channel.
I don't think we do.
So you like all the moody, atmospheric stuff in the show, Jason?
Yeah.
Was there anything in this? I think I probably know the answer to this, but was there anything in this that you found like legitimately unsettling, unnerving, where you were like kind of creeped out and not sure if you wanted to keep watching, or was it just atmospheric?
I think it was kind of just atmospheric. There's a spot later where you have the
Oh yeah, that is Winona Ryder and Beetlejuice. I wasn't even thinking about that. That's why they said you've seen Beetlejuice, right?
Yeah,
Like that
yeah,
is
yeah,
Winona
yeah.
Ryder. I wasn't even thinking about that. Yep.
I wasn't thinking about that either.
Yep.
Because I had heard her name in some clip, but I was like, where is she? I know she's in some, like,
And she's doing the sequel,
90s movie or something, but yeah.
which they're filming.
Yeah.
And that is a
Hopefully
movie I
that's
didn't think I would be excited about. I kind of am
At
now.
least okay.
Well, you've got to watch the first episode of Wednesday, because it's that entire crew making that show. And as soon as you see that, you'll feel better about Beetlejuice too.
Yeah. I think the only thing that
I say entire, the big, writers, producers and stuff with that, because I'm pretty sure they're even bringing in the Smallville guys to write that.
Oh wow.
I think. But anyway.
I think the
Yes.
I don't remember.
There is a pilot thing that always irks me, and it's supposed to. This is not a criticism, where you get a great character that is introduced right away, and you think, oh, this character's going to be fun to follow, and then it turns out that it's just a character actor, and we're going to kill a character off right away in the pilot.
I don't
and
like that.
In this, it's the restaurant owner.
Yeah. Because, like, I actually really like him, and I feel like if we actually spent more time with him, he'd probably be my favorite character.
I started latching onto this guy, and then immediately we have to kill him off.
Yeah.
And these things are, of course, done on purpose because you want your guest stars to be as good as your regular cast.
Yeah.
And because this is a multi-chapter movie before it's a TV show, you really want everybody on of that caliber. Like, technically it's guest stars, but what it really is a if not a cameo, a one-off character that's introduced to move the story along in some way and then get written off.
Yeah.
Then get written out.
What do you think of, and this isn't happening, like, right here, but
Sure,
what do you
sure.
think of the incidental music? Like,
Again,
is it too in your face?
It's not. It's really not. And most of it, like I said earlier, seems to be picked for real clear thematic reasons.
Yeah. Well, and I know at least
you get
one of
White
them-
Rabbit at the end, which is a real, which is always used to invoke the idea of going somewhere otherworldly, looking into something that you're not going to be able to unsee once you start down the rabbit hole, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sadly, I now can't watch that without just flashing back to the trailers for Matrix 4.
Yeah.
So this, sorry, did you want to say something?
No.
This is the scene that in this pilot that most makes me think sometimes this show is really keeping in mind its modern audience and not trying as hard to make us feel like we're watching it back in the 80s. So this is supposed to, I think, be kind of a fun irony where we're watching this in 2016 or 20 whatever, going, look how quaint it is that these kids are excited that they get to talk to people all the way in Australia through an analog device that's like a CB radio.
Yeah.
That's the kind of idea that you throw in intentionally in hindsight.
Yeah.
And that's fun.
Yeah, I agree.
And it doesn't feel obnoxiously tongue-in-cheek about it. It's just keeping the audience in mind.
Right. And I wasn't even thinking that when I watched it. Like I wasn't even I was like, "Oh, yeah, it's the 80s. They have that." Like I wasn't even thinking, "Oh, we don't have that now."
Dawn on Ranger Power, that's the whole reason that Star Trek came up. Is we were talking about Winona Ryder in that movie. We've also got the banter here is great with Lord of the Rings versus The Hobbit.
Yeah.
We've also got really believable but also likable kids. And I've always said this
Yeah.
is really hard to write. So we don't have kids that are too overly mature or overly brilliant, but they're also not all obnoxious and I want them to die because they're just like screaming or making fart noises constantly, or you know what I mean. So it's the right balance of immaturity and like level-headed human being.
Yeah.
They feel the age they're supposed to be.
Yeah. I think this is the one scene that scared me a little bit because I wasn't expecting it.
How did you feel about the flashback choice here?
I like it, honestly.
Do you like that? Did you feel like it was trying to dupe you?
Well, I think it was, but like really it's really easy to figure out because like Poltergeist is 82.
Oh, good call. Well, yeah, if you know your stuff, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that.
And then that's like the one thing that freaked me out a bit. Was
Really?
Just, like,
just that sound?
not the sound, but like it being all like kind of like torn up and stuff, and there's no one there and stuff like that. Kind of.
Oh,
It was
I
like,
see what you're saying.
Like I wasn't expecting
The
that.
cut to the modern set now.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And they actually do that a couple times.
I didn't
in
even
the
really
pilots.
pick up on that.
Yeah.
I like watching these things through your lens because I take stuff for that for granted. I've seen things like that so many times
Yeah.
that I can see how that would be so effective and palpable. So what I love about the restaurant owner is that, again, he's this gruff guy with a heart of gold where I'm not at first totally sure what he's going to do and what to do with this guy.
Yeah.
And he's just trying to help this girl out. But when he when he sees her at first, again, it's like, how much of a horror thing is this going to be? Am I supposed to distrust every character where we're gonna have just a lot of excuses for people to be horrible to each other?
Yeah.
And it isn't that. But of course, we've also already established that it's a small town where crime doesn't happen very much, and there's not a lot of horrible people doing bad things to each other. It's not the Smallville thing where, like, oh, it's a small town and weird things happen in this town. It's the opposite. It's nothing strange ever happens here. Which makes the title fun. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's like Stranger Things here have not happened.
Strange.
No, they have not.
Right.
And so maybe at this point I shouldn't even be questioning this guy because we've already established that the town is kind of a happy, safe place. But then you never know what's going on behind closed doors either.
Yeah.
It could be that that sheriff just isn't paying enough attention to things that are happening in his town.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't even start doing his job before noon.
But yeah, I really like how with this scene it's just really like, because I was actually expecting him to not know really what to do with her or anything, and just kind of had but instead he's that was a nice scene.
This is the most not Spielberg, pardon me. This is the most Stephen King thing in the show so far. Is like, this is kind of Firestarter, where you've got somebody with superpowers on the run being chased by people from some kind of science outfit, be it government or a private company or whatever it is. That's Firestarter. Firestarter is a father and his daughter on the run after in after an experiment that gives her powers after she's born.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Firestarter, by the way.
Really? I haven't read any King
I think
books,
you're right about the age I was when I read that.
Really?
And it freaked me out, but I would probably let you read it. It's one of the King books that is as sci-fi as it is horror, and probably more so. And it's got a lot of ties to, comics and superheroes and stuff, without being a straight-up superhero thing.
Yeah.
Senior Sticks, how big does the population have to be a small cap? To be a small town? I mean, it's somewhat arbitrary, but not 45,000. Okay, which is what Smallville is at the beginning of that show. Like Lawrence, Kansas, when I was growing up in it anyway, was 45,000. Okay, that is not a small town. It's not a big city either. I mean, it's a small city, but it is a city. Typically, around like 10 to 15,000.
Yeah.
And that's the sense I get for the population of this town. It's probably 7.
Yeah.
This town's probably not, and it actually feels like a real small town. Can you believe that? Unless they came out and said, did they tell us what the population is?
I don't think they did. At least not.
It looks like the size of Morrilton to me.
Yeah.
Maybe even a little bit smaller. I grew up in a small town in Arkansas for a while called Morrilton. Writer says, thanks for streaming today. Otherwise, I'd have nothing going on. Oh, you're welcome. I like the way the sheriff handles the mother here, and their dynamic is interesting.
Yeah.
Like, as it gets more serious, and he starts to, get more compassionate and serious about it, but is also constantly, trying to help her not, lose her head about it.
Mm-hmm.
And also isn't sure that he can trust her story and what she's saying.
Yeah. And she's...
It's a real good start for mystery all the way around.
Yeah. And I really like how she plays this character. And she's... Her character is about on the same level as the mom in Poltergeist, right?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that movie in
it's definitely like that. And I just watched The Exorcist, and there's a distraught mom in that movie, of course, too. That's a, sicker, scarier, more freakish kind of situation. So she's gonna get even more distraught and panicky. It is possible. It is more than possible to make a character like this unsympathetic when she gets too whiny and cryy and freaking out. You need some degree of that, otherwise you're gonna be like, she doesn't seem to even care about her own kid. But like, a little goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
I remember as the show went along, finding her to get a little bit grating with some of that after a while, but I don't know if I'm right about it. It's been too long since I've seen it.
Okay. This pilot actually does make me want to watch the show more, though.
Yeah.
I know we'll get to that,
We'll get to those questions. But yes, me too. And this would be an easy thing to sit down on a weekend and binge through. So this might be a really good, especially, I mean, we've got a decent crowd this afternoon. Clearly, people are interested in us talking about the show. So this might be the first thing for us to come back and do a follow-up on.
Maybe, yeah.
I will say I have gone back and watched one more episode of House.
Yeah, I want to watch that episode.
And it was a later season 6 episode, but there's one with James Earl Jones.
Yeah, I want to watch the one with Dave Matthews.
I'd like to see that too. That's crazy.
I think that's a season 4 episode, maybe. I'm not sure. I really like the dad here. He's hilarious.
Who does he remind you of, Jason?
I don't know, the dad from Back to the Future.
He's George McFly. That's exactly right. Yep. Yep, he's ineffectual. He kind of lets the house just run without him. He kind of lets his wife kind of take charge, and he just stays in the background. He seems a little sad and pathetic, maybe. I don't remember much about him from the rest of the season, so I'm sure he'll get more developed, but he seems kind of in his own little world a little bit. Do you think that the mother is right in kind of berating him for the way he handles the situation?
I'm not sure.
She keeps looking to him, waiting for him to step up a little bit. And yeah, he's a little too flippant.
Yeah.
Don't you think? But he's not vilified either.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I don't feel like the scene turns on him. He's just again, he's in his own world. He's not really appreciating the gravity of the situation enough. It's probably just as simple as he needs to back his wife up more because she's right about the law she's trying to lay down. And like, let's keep our kids safe. Again, everybody in this town is used to just minding their own business, going out, even the kids doing whatever they want to, and not having to worry about any kind of repercussions. Not have to worry about their safety. You know, it's your typical. We probably don't lock the doors. You know, kind of early '80s town. I love, so this is what I'm talking about with details that matter. There's a reason that the sheriff's lack of interest in science comes up here.
Yeah.
And the reason that his late daughter's obsession with galaxies and space and all that comes up because there's going to be a big sci-fi component to the show.
Yeah. Well, and
it suggests that the stakes are more grandiose, that the scope of this is bigger than this little town maybe.
Yeah. Well, and I like his his whole thing with like his kid compared to the mom in this, where they kind of have a thing where like, you know, they have a weird relationship with it because, you know, his kid is dead and her kid is missing.
Yeah, so they've got something in common now.
Yeah.
And the question is, does that? Yeah, it's a good parallel, very good. But then the question is he like properly motivated because of that thing they have in common, or is he too close to it because of that?
Yeah.
I'm finding myself wanting to see certain characters from this and Bates Motel like switch places. Like what would the sheriff in Bates Motel be like if he was in this small town instead? I want to see that. I think the show does a really great job of taking situations that we've seen 100 times before and not go for the too obvious outcome with them. Like I'm simultaneously seeing typical situations like this. Oh, the kid that sneaks into his girlfriend's room through the window. You get that in a million trillion things. And so simultaneously I'm going, okay, I've seen this before, but these are the situations that help to make this authentic. So again, you've got to find that happy medium. You've got to split the middle. And if you avoid all those things, it's just going to feel like a 2010s show that takes place in the 80s. And sometimes, you know, it's just like stereotypes, right? Typical situations crop up in movies, sometimes, and very often, just sometimes exaggerated, right? Because they are things that happen a lot in real life. So you certainly did get. I mean, you hear story after story about people who grew up, any time before a lot of the modern technologies that we have now that make it harder with cell phones and things, sneaking out of their parents' house and going to see their girlfriends or boyfriends.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, there's a reason that's there. The tension in that moment before he gets killed is great, and then it just hurts my feelings because I was really digging on that guy. But I like the way that we're establishing tone for the series with things like this, where we're making it very clear that this is not supposed to be a fun catharsis kind of horror to see, and again, it's thriller before it's horror, right? To see people that we don't like getting constantly killed off.
Yeah.
So it's really good, basic character-driven storytelling 101. You make us really like this guy because he's trying to help this girl, and then you kill him, and our feelings are hurt, and that makes us more sucked in and continue to care about the other characters that we've latched onto, because it also makes the stakes feel higher. It makes it feel like, we could lose anybody. We don't know who the main characters are yet.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them are very clear. We're not going to kill off, Mike or his friends right away.
Right.
And probably not the sheriff. I guess he could die in the third episode, but probably not.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, I know he doesn't, but I'm just saying when you're watching this pilot.
I feel like the character that would be most likely to is this guy, though.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Just if you don't know what, but...
Yeah, he could be another victim, by the monster, the second, third episode or something.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
But that was kind of the biggest surprise to me in the episode, really, is that he doesn't end up taking advantage of her at the end of the scene.
Yeah, yeah.
And I kind of thought she was going to slap him in the face and...
Yeah, yeah.
Throw him out of a room. I thought the parents were going to walk in. That's why this works, is because they don't go the obvious way, and they make this guy, at least right now, likable enough. You still don't totally know where he's going to go. I think you're still supposed to wonder, and I can't remember exactly where we take him, but I think you're still supposed to wonder, with all the talk of his conquests with all these girls that he's been with, whether he's slept with them or just kissed them or whatever it is. I think you're still supposed to be suspicious of his motivations. But I also appreciate that I'm not kind of tuning out during the romance scenes.
Yeah.
And some of it is, this actress is spectacular.
Yeah. Yeah, she's great.
It also feels like she walked out of the Karate Kid or something.
Yeah. Even just... And I think she's a really good mix between Karate Kid and Cobra Kai.
Oh, good call.
She reminds me of the girl in Karate Kid and the girl in Cobra Kai.
Yeah, that's a great call. Yeah. One of the things that helps make Winona Ryder's character sympathetic, where you still feel for her, is the way she handles her other son after the way she berated him at the beginning for not being around when she thought he was going to be. And you again, this is just character writing 101 stuff, where characters have to be allowed to make mistakes. They have to be flawed, but they can't be defined only by their flaws and their mistakes.
Yeah.
They have to be reasonable unless you make it very clear that they somehow came to be unreasonable in a believable way, right? That's sympathetic character writing. And so, yes, he made a mistake at the beginning of the episode in not being around when he was expected to be for his brother, but he went out to work to support the family.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was understandably angry with him for that, but she doesn't blame him because it's not his fault that the brother disappeared.
Right.
And she is being a good mother in making it very clear to him that she does not blame him for that.
Yeah.
When she berated him at the beginning, it was in a moment of shock and panic and weakness.
Yeah. I wonder...
So this is not a full-on dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
But it's, not going to be a perfect family either, because, I mean, she is a single mother.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about the thing with her ex-husband and all that.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't really know much about that yet.
Right.
X-Men 134 is brought up again. We've sort of bookended the episode with it.
Yeah.
And again, that's because we're just about to meet her.
Yeah.
And I love the subtlety of that reference.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to look it up. I mean, most people, even if they're X-Men fans,
Right.
or casual X-Men fans, they're not going to immediately know that that's Dark Phoenix.
Right.
Especially
I
if
didn't know that.
they're not old enough to have grown up with that.
Right.
And so to answer a question that you asked like a long time ago,
Yeah.
that's why it's not too in your face about that stuff.
Yeah.
It's using the things that would have been there to enhance the story, rather than as a gimmick to make you want to watch it.
Yeah.
And that's the perfect ending to your first big setup episode.
Yeah, because I really like how it's you have pretty much the two big subplots of the kids and 11, and then they like submerge.
Converge.
Converge.
If they submerged, they go in the water.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
They come together at the end.
Yep. And it all felt very relaxed, or they're from Animorphs, or they're ET.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's the thing that they're going to have to hide.
Right.
But she's actually a person, so she's going to be part of that group. And then there's an interesting gender dynamic, because it's a group of guys, and we've been dealing a little bit with how they feel about girls, and they're preteens that have hormones, and they're getting older, and now suddenly a girl's going to join the group. I think it's really intentional to make it difficult at first to tell that she's a girl.
Yeah.
To the point where I think they actually do too good of a job of that. Because that moment where the restaurant owner looks deep in her eyes and is like, and gets that he's looking at a girl and not a boy, I'm like, I don't actually know if I would be able to tell still.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, he's there and I'm not, but they got a camera right in her face, and I'm like, I don't know though, with the shaved head and like her cheekbone structure and everything.
Yeah.
I don't know that you'd really be able to tell.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. And she was the only character that I knew about.
11.
So I knew from the beginning that she was a girl. So that I didn't really have that.
Oh, sure.
But, cause you I had a hard time not, like, that was the only thing that I knew about it. Like, I didn't even know that it was set in the 80s. Like,
well, that's probably why I wanted to show it to you, because I know that this is a time period that you're interested in, and that a lot of your favorite movies go back to the 80s, if not early 90s.
yeah.
Well, should we go ahead and go through our regular end of show pilot questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so first of all, does the pilot tell or start a good story, or is it simply a litany of character introductions? Does it have pilotitis?
I don't think it does.
And it is the trend these days, and I say these days, this is 7 years old now, but the trend, 16, but the trend with streaming shows and even a lot of broadcast serialized shows, because of course most things aren't episodic anymore, is to have a really great start out the gate. It's the opposite of what it used to be. It's a great start out the gate, and very often even like a really solid first season, and then it just all goes downhill from there. As opposed to what we used to have with episodic shows, like we talked about real hard with Next Generation, where you have a hard time finding your footing and you struggle for a long time, and then by season 2, 3, maybe even 4, you come into your own and the show finds its footing. And you don't hear that phrase bandied about as much anymore.
Right.
You know, it takes a while to find its footing. In fact, I roll my eyes when I hear people say that about things. Like, not to, get into New Trek too hard, but like, I reviewed, and I don't review those shows anymore much, but I reviewed the first season of Discovery and then the second season of Discovery, and it was. It didn't feel like it had any idea what it was doing. It was all over the place. It was scrambling and it was convoluted, made no sense. And I had a few commenters that would be like, "Well, Cap, it's Star Trek. It'll find its footing."
Yeah.
They always do. Remember TNG? It took till season 3. I'm like, yeah, you know what the difference is? That was a show making a bunch of separate individual stories, like making a movie every week, basically. And New Trek is doing what, up until recently with Strange New Worlds, doing what most streaming shows do, which is it's not episodic. It's telling one story from beginning to end.
I actually didn't know that. I thought Discovery was episodic.
It's not, and it's real stretched thin, and yeah. So anyway, not to get into the weeds with that again, but you see why I bring that up.
Yeah.
It's like, it'll find its foot. No, it won't, and
well,
it never
first
did.
Season TNG is watchable. Like it's not.
That's debatable, but sure.
It's certain episodes, like.
But more often these days, I guess what I'm getting at is you get something like this, or House of Cards had this to a lesser degree because it stayed decently watchable until the inevitable happened with Kevin Spacey, and then when his world fell apart like a House of Cards, that whole thing is so weird to me. Anyway, very disturbing. And then I won't get into that here with a 13-year-old, but anyway, and then you've got shows like even broadcast stuff like Dexter, just a brilliant first couple of seasons, and then especially by 4 it starts to kind of flounder. So this happens over and over again with stuff now. So yes, this does not have pilotitis. I would have been shocked if it had.
Yeah, well, I think it does character introductions just like an 80s movie would, right? I think they do that really well.
It is the best. I have to say first episode because it's not really a pilot, but it's the best first episode that we've seen so far for natural character introduction and situation setup.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think it's absolutely flawless at that.
Yeah.
And it's a treat because you're like, well, if this can keep up this kind of storytelling for 10 or 12 episodes or whatever, however many episodes the first season has, and stay that tight and have that kind of effective setup and payoff, and if it can keep doing that even from episode to episode, you're really in for a treat.
Yeah.
Who is the character that you would most want to see, or that you would come back for the most?
Either
you can't say the restaurant owner because he's dead.
Yeah, either the I almost said either the restaurant or the no. I'll come back for the restaurant. It's a character now.
Those fries looked good. I mean,
yeah, they did. Either 11 or the sheriff.
It's absolutely the sheriff for me.
Yeah,
and he's got the most intriguing backstory.
Yeah, I think 11 is. I think I would more want to return to the sheriff for like characteristics and stuff, and then I would more want to return for like backstory and stuff for 11,
and probably for overall mythology, right?
Yeah.
We always ask this: if the show is in a genre you're not usually drawn to, does it make you more interested in that genre?
Yeah.
I don't know that you're not interested in the genre in the first place, though.
I am. I definitely do want to see more of this.
Like, I never did, but if I had pitched you this show, you probably would have sat down to watch it.
Probably, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I had to put this on before you would have been interested in it.
Yeah.
You know? the time period, the throwback nature of it, the situation. Like, you haven't seen a lot of thrillers and horror, but what you have, I feel like you kind of like that genre theoretically.
Yeah.
There's just always that question of what you can handle at your age, I guess. So I don't have that as much with it. Where like I watched this and then suddenly I gotta go, like eat up all the Stephen King or Stephen King-esque stuff I never saw, or the 80s, like all the kids getting on bikes and going off on some adventure, sorts of movies. Like, I don't really have that with it. It makes me want to watch more of this show.
It makes me want to watch more, or it makes me want to read Stephen King.
Sure, yeah, and that's what it does for me too. It makes me want to go back to Firestarter and read the stuff that he wrote in the especially 70s and 80s that I never read.
Yeah.
Yep. Does it feel like the show already has an identity, or does it need to find its footing? We kind of talked about this already, but it's got that nailed immediate from like frame one.
Yeah.
It knows precisely what it is.
Yep.
If you're a network exec, would you greenlight the series? If this were a pilot, obviously you would. You'd be crazy not to. And realistically, will you keep watching this show? I definitely want to give it a second watch finally.
Yeah, I'm really interested in as to like, what certain characters are like, and or what how we build on certain characters and stuff.
We should definitely sit down and binge this together.
Yeah.
And we're not promising anything, but we might do a follow-up on the pilot show for this one.
Yeah.
Because it looks like there's probably some interest in it. And, yeah, like I said, I had a hard time getting into it first time around. And watching it with you, I was certainly enjoying it a great deal more.
Yeah.
And was more intrigued by it. And like I said, I don't really remember a lot of what even happens in it, so it will be like watching it for the very first time.
Yeah.
Robert, to your guy's point about Sheriff Hopper and science, I would say Hopper blames science for failing to save his daughter's life. Oh yeah, good call, which I wasn't getting just from that scene, but I'm sure that will become clearer as the series progresses. Well, anything else we want to bring up, Mr. Jayson? Right now, before we bid everybody farewell.
Yeah.
This was another good one.
Yeah.
We've really only watched one bad pilot so far.
Pretty much, yeah.
Which was Animorphs.
That was Animorphs.
Hey, it gave us an excuse to talk about Animorphs, though.
Yeah.
So that was fun. But what do you think? So out of 5, and we actually have watched 6 pilots and 5 shows.
Yeah.
What is your favorite pilot so far?
So far, my favorite pilot.
It might be unfair to compare them.
Gosh.
We'll check in every now and again and do this.
I really liked House.
Yeah.
I really liked Addams Family. And I feel like this did the best job so far for making me want to watch more of the show.
Yeah.
And I think
it's also almost unfair to compare this to anything else because this is the only pilot we've done so far that, or first episode, that is in any way cinematic or trying to be super cinematic.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, everything else we've done so far is very TV.
Yeah.
And this is not. This could have been in the movie theater.
Yeah.
I'm sure there have been marathons of this show shown in the theater.
Yeah. I would say...
Mine's Addams Family.
Yeah, I think Addams Family for, like, character introductions and, just overall, like...
Just entertainment value?
Entertainment value, yeah. I think Addams Family.
This is definitely the best written and probably the best made pilot so far.
Yeah.
But again, it's kind of unfair to compare it to stuff. The one big thing I wish it had done differently has been shot on film.
Yeah.
Do you have any... Because we haven't really done a lot in the way of criticism. Do you really have any complaints about it?
No, not really. No.
Yeah, it's a really solid opening.
It's a really solid opening.
Daniverse, at one point, I thought one of the episodes could have done well had Netflix pushed it. Oh, I guess I'm not sure what he means by that. I started reading that comment before I had a chance to read it or out loud, and I'm not totally sure what that means.
Yeah.
One of the episodes could have done well. Of what? Well, anyway, I'm not sure what we're talking about. Jayson, remind everybody what we're doing next time. We have already announced it.
Yeah, we have.
And you picked it. I picked Stranger Things and gave Jayson the next episode.
Yeah, you
and
gave me
asked
like
him
10 minutes to think of something.
to pick something that. Yeah, well, I'm glad I did because under the pressure, you went for a great idea.
Yeah.
I asked Jayson to pick something else that kind of fits into the Halloween motif. Now, Halloween will have already passed us by, or we might end up broadcasting. Actually, right around or on Halloween, now that I'm thinking about it, Jayson, because that is next Tuesday.
Yeah.
So we could be the day before or on Tuesday. So no, I'm glad we're doing one more Halloween one because we'll be right in there. Mm-hmm. Oh, he's talking about theaters. He's saying one of the episodes could have done well if Netflix put it in theaters. He said, I believe it was one of the finales. They'll do it occasionally with. I think with premieres, but also they'll do like small releases like Fathom events and things for direct to Netflix movies. So I saw El Camino in the theater the same day it opened, or the same day it was on Netflix.
Yeah,
which was kind of weird because I couldn't wait to watch that. And the day it came out, like I could have watched it that morning, but I had to wait because I was going with Adam to the theater.
Yeah.
No, Brian, we already announced it, so it's not Goosebumps or Beetleborgs.
Beetleborgs.
Well, you know why you'd watch Beetleborgs in Halloween, right?
Because of the haunted house.
Yeah. I didn't know if you remembered that, but yeah. It has a haunted house and kind of
as their like command center.
Yeah, and they're kind of ripping off Addams Family in going to Universal Monsters.
Yeah.
Because they got like the Frankenstein guy and they got the werewolf guy and
yeah.
Or I'm sorry, not Addams Family, Monsters. They're kind of ripping off Monsters with that. Yeah. Anyway.
So next week we are doing Gargoyles.
There it is. And we're gonna have to figure out when we're even gonna watch that.
We're gonna have to find an hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah, because that is a 5-part pilot.
Yeah.
And that one I think is maybe a true pilot. I think they made that as a movie and then went to series with it.
Okay.
Well, anyway, thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Pilot Show, and we'll be with you again sometime at the beginning of next week, Monday or Tuesday probably. It's more likely to be Tuesday, because we may have to watch Gargoyles on Monday to do it. But anyway, we're going out of town this weekend. Thanks so much. Hope you enjoyed it. And for anybody watching this in real time that wants to come back tonight, we'll be doing the Captain Logan Show Halloween special, our annual Halloween special at 7 o'clock Central Time. And tonight we're going to be... all the questions tonight, Jayson, are going to be couched as what is scarier. You got to pick two things, and I gotta tell you which of those two things I think would be scarier.
Cool.
So thanks once again for being here, and we'll see you again real soon. I was Captain Logan,
and I was Jayson.
Bye, everybody.